Hey everybody, and welcome back to Wildcard Wednesday. I'm your host, Jonathan Moody, and today is another wild card. So last week we had a review that was an older review that I did with Lila Toba, talking about Upgrade. And today I wanted to talk about slasher films and my love for them, and how basically this subgenre has become my favorite. So sort of, let me give you a background. I did not grow up on horror. The closest to horror that I grew up on was like Ghostbusters. I did not, or Jaws, things like that, which are, I mean, for kids are kind of scary, but they were not, I tried sneaking like, Friday the 13th, but I get like nightmares. And so for the longest time, my family was just like, do not watch horror films. And so for the longest time, I didn't watch the horror films. And then I discovered a little movie that we reviewed called Scream. And I watched that film and I was shocked and surprised at how much fun getting back into slasher films was. I started hunting down every slasher film I could think of. In that time period, 96 or on, after Scream got revived, there became like I Know What You Did Last Summer, The Faculty, which was, kind of an alien version of, slasher. There was it Urban Legends? There was a bunch of Urban Legends, like three or four of them, something like that. I don't know, good amount. And there was many other, types of slashers. And I became obsessed with slashers. Valentine, which we just had, I believe we just had Valentine's Day. So itself, I mean, you have to watch Valentine's on or My Bloody Valentine, which is also another slasher. There's tons of these slasher films that came out. Friday the 13th was always my favorite. We'll be discussing that later, I think, in Horror Film Lovers, because we keep doing Mainstream Mondays. We'll get into all the franchises. Nightmare on Elm Street slasher, but it's a supernatural slasher. There's, Child's Play. I mean, just the list goes on and on. Texas Chainsaw, on and on. So I got into slashers when I was younger, when I was in high school. Then I got older and I started watching even ones that I hadn't ever heard of, like The Burning, or what is the one? There's The Burning, there's Just Before Dawn, Sleepaway Camp. I mean, if you look at my library of films, most of them are slashers. I love slashers, no pun intended, to death. I seriously, they are my favorite. And so when I got into them, and I've been trying to figure out why, like, slashers, because like if you talk to my buddy Paul, who does Indie Film Cafe with me, he is not a big fan of slashers. He doesn't like girls, like hot girls being, chopped up into little bits. Like, he doesn't want to see that. I get it. Like, I understand that. I think the thrill of slashers to me was always the idea that it could be someone I think that's why I like Scream so much, because it was somebody Sidney Prescott knew. It's just a person behind a mask. Now, when it was Jason, or let's look at Jason, or look at who else? Freddy, things like that. They're people who've died and come back as, like, somewhat ghosts or whatever, and have, whatever, murder people. So with that being said, horror films kind of give you, the slasher films kind of give you this feeling of like dread, of like, who is the person behind the mask? Is it somebody I know? Is it somebody gruesome? Is it like, who is it? Sometimes it's an escaped convict, and that from the very beginning. So I've always been fascinated by slashers. I've always loved them. I see a lot of these indie filmmakers making slasher films, either for their first film or they just keep making them. There's actually even a company that does nothing but slasher. A couple companies that do nothing but slashers, and I think that's awesome. Because if that's what you like, do it. Some are great, and some not so great, but that's okay. They're a learning experience, especially with slashers. You can learn a lot more quicker, see how you can make people jump. That's the thing. And to me, that's the thing. Like, I'm not a really big fan of like fake jump scares, where you see it in like The Conjuring or something, where they would open up the door, even in slasher films too. Even Scream 4 did this a lot, or whatever Scream movies did a lot, where they would open up the door and the person wouldn't be there, but they'd be in the next door next to it. And so I don't recommend those anymore, because people can see them coming. It's sort of annoying. But I get them, like I get it. I understand it. So I'm a huge fan of slasher films. Like, I enjoy this. Like, I enjoy films that sort of make you like on the edge of your seat, suspense thrillers. You just don't know where the killer is. Could he be like lurking behind the shadows, behind the door, behind a tree? You have no idea, because you're not supposed to, not until the killer comes out and chops somebody's head off. And to me, that's amazing. Like, I'm really, really, really into that. But I see, once again, I think a lot of people don't like slashers for like a couple different reasons. One reason being that it's too predictable these days. Too many times people are like, I know who the killer is. Or if it is the killer, they're like, how could a person do that? What's going on here? Whatever. So it, and there's been so many that it's really hard to be original in that subgenre. But once in a while there comes like a slasher that just kind of changes things up and switches it up. Hatchet was one of the movies that for the longest time people were kind of, I think they weren't saying slashers were dead, but they were just sort of like kind of bored with them. And I think that's because of Scream becoming this big boom for a while. Kind of all of a sudden they kind of all fizzled out, and independent films started to mimic them. And there was that movie, I think John Ward and I talked about it, but it was a David Dakota movie called Final Stab, which was originally called, he told me it was originally called Final Scream. And that was like a ripoff of Scream, guy in a mask going around killing his, friends or whatever, which, if you go to think about it, all of those movies are from other movies and stuff. So then there was the Scary Movie franchise, which are comedies. But so anyway, the point is that there was so many of these movies that just kind of, after a while, they kind of fizzled out. Hatchet was one of the movies that sort of revitalized, that, love for it and everything. But then even that sort of, it fizzled out again. And I feel like horror does this a lot, and you guys can let me know what your thoughts are. But I think horror does this a lot, where all of a sudden a horror film will sort of get, notoriety. Like, I'll bring this, not slasher, but I'll bring this up. Found footage films like Blair Witch Project did really good. Then I remember there was like one called like the St. Francis, experiment or something. And then there was these other ones that were very much just found footage films, and they didn't do as well as like Blair Witch, because there's only one Blair Witch. Like, I've talked about this on Indie Film Cafe. I'm not a huge Blair Witch fan itself. Like, I'm kind of bored by the movie, but I'm bored by, found footage films. I respect that it got created and everything. So, you have to switch things up. You have to make a found footage slasher film, which has been made. You have to, you have to create all these different things to kind of spruce things up and make things new, or wait a while, then release something that is like Paranormal Activity was made years after, like 10 years or so after the original, the original Blair Witch, and all of a sudden it's the new Blair Witch, and it makes more money, I think, than even Blair Witch did. And it started Blumhouse because of that, So blame Paranormal Activity if you don't like Blumhouse. But that was the thing. Like, that movie crossed the line and made these things. So yeah, it's incredible. Slasher films have still sort of have this little stigma, I think, to them than like ghost movies or found footage, maybe even to an extent. But like, a lot of people do not like what is it? Don't like found or don't like slashers because, once again, I think it goes back to Scream and how Scream sort of created this thing and brought it out. And all of a sudden it was these teenagers who, there's a killer in a mask, and you had to, Scooby-Doo, you had to figure out who the killer was. And that sort of pissed a lot of people off. But I don't know. Once again, I like Scream, the original Scream. I liked not knowing, I like murder mysteries myself. I like Scooby-Doo. I like, pulling off the mask and revealing the killer, finding out their motive. Why did they do it? In some cases it's a really shitty motive. But in some cases it's amazing. It's very well detailed. Things that you should have, once you started watching the movie, you started figuring it out from the very beginning, but you haven't. And there's a reason, and usually there's something that throws you off. And I love slashers. So this is my favorite subgenre of film. And I don't know. Every time I watch a slasher, I just get into this like cool little world. Now sometimes I'm not a big fan of it because either I see it coming or just things don't make any sense. And sometimes that's the filmmaking and sometimes it's the writing. But it just doesn't make any sense to me, and I'm checked out. Once you check out a movie, I feel like you've lost your audience if somebody's checked out. And once they start getting really mad, that's the problem. And you'll find out about that in my next First Time Watch Friday. You'll find out why I got really mad at a slasher. So we'll get into that. But until then, if you like slashers, let me know. If you don't like slashers, if you think this is a terrible subgenre and they shouldn't be making them, blah, 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 let me know that too. I mean, please tell your opinion. I don't want everybody to think my opinion is gold and that you guys all should just love my opinion. My opinion is my opinion. I like this movie. I didn't like, certain other movies or whatever. So, just let me know what you guys think, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Bye.